The forbidden fruit, a surreal start. Picture this: medieval England. A woman likes a guy, so she takes an apple, soaks it in her armpit sweat for hours, then hands it to him as a romantic gift. If he bites into that sweat-soaked fruit, congratulations. She just successfully courted him. This wasn't a joke. This wasn't some twisted dare between drunk peasants. This was documented courtship protocol. Real historical records, practiced across England for centuries. And here's the thing that will absolutely blow your mind. This bizarre ritual connects directly to modern romance traditions you follow today, without even realizing it. Welcome to Hearts and History. I'm your host for this journey through the most fascinating romance traditions that shaped our world. Get comfortable, dim those lights. Tonight we're diving deep into medieval courtship customs, so strange they'll make your Tinder horror stories seem normal. If you enjoy falling asleep to history and waking up knowing more, hit subscribe. And hey, drop a comment. Where are you listening from right now? What time is it where you are? I love seeing our global community of history lovers settling in for the night together. Medieval England, 13th century. Marriage isn't about love, it's about survival. Every courtship ritual serves a purpose. Families need alliances. Women need security. Men need heirs. The church controls everything. And in this world of arranged marriages and political unions, how do you signal genuine romantic interest? How do you say "I choose you" when choice barely exists? Enter the apple. Not just any apple. A very special, very personal, very intimate apple that would make modern dating apps seem tame by comparison. Here's how apple courtship actually worked. A woman would select her target, usually at a market or festival where social mixing was acceptable. She'd take a fresh apple, place it against her bare skin, typically in her armpit, and keep it there for hours, sometimes overnight. Her body heat, her scent, her natural oils, all absorbed into that fruit. This wasn't random, this was deliberate scent marking, like wolves, but with fruit, and significantly more romantic implications than that comparison suggests. The presentation moment was everything. She couldn't just walk up and say, "Here, eat my armpit apple." Social protocol mattered, usually happened during harvest festivals or church gatherings. She'd approach with the apple hidden, maybe wrapped in cloth. Eye contact, a subtle smile, then the reveal, offering the apple like a precious gift, which, honestly, it was. Because in a world where women had virtually no agency in choosing husbands, this was her declaration of independence, her way of saying, "I pick you." Why apples? Think about it. Apples were precious, expensive. Not everyone had access to fresh fruit year-round, so offering an apple already showed investment. But more importantly, apples symbolized temptation. Eve and the Garden of Eden, forbidden knowledge, sexual awakening. A woman offering an apple wasn't just sharing food, she was offering herself as a romantic possibility. The religious symbolism was absolutely intentional. These weren't ignorant peasants. They understood exactly what they were communicating through this fruit-based foreplay. The man's response was crucial. If he accepted and ate the apple immediately, that was enthusiastic consent. He was saying yes to courtship. If he accepted but didn't eat it, maybe he was interested but cautious, needed to think about it. If he refused the apple entirely, brutal rejection. But here's where it gets interesting. Some men would take a bite, then return the apple to her. That meant yes, but we need to be careful about this. Because remember, unauthorized courtship could get you in serious trouble with families, the church, local authorities. The scent aspect was scientifically brilliant. Before perfumes and deodorants, natural body chemistry determined attraction. Pheromones, immune system compatibility, genetic diversity markers, all communicated through scent. By absorbing her natural oils into that apple, she was essentially giving him a biological compatibility test. If her scent appealed to him, good genetic match. If it repulsed him, nature saying, "Move along," this wasn't medieval ignorance. This was intuitive understanding of human attraction that modern science has only recently validated through studies. What made this ritual truly scandalous was the intimacy. In medieval society, unmarried men and women barely touched. Handshakes were inappropriate. Unchaperoned conversations were forbidden. Physical contact before marriage could result in accusations of impropriety. But through apple courtship, a woman could share her most personal scent, her body's chemical signature, without anyone else understanding the intimacy of the exchange, hidden in plain sight, subversive, revolutionary, a secret language of desire, disguised as simple fruit sharing, pure genius, the practice connected to broader medieval courtship traditions. Love tokens, secret messages, coded communications between potential partners, knights wearing ladies' handkerchiefs in tournaments, women dropping gloves for favoured men to retrieve, elaborate dances where hand placement conveyed romantic interest. Apple courtship fit perfectly into this ecosystem of subtle romantic rebellion, ways for individuals to assert personal choice within systems designed to eliminate personal choice. Small acts of defiance that shaped the future of romantic culture across Europe. And here's what's absolutely wild about this tradition. We still do versions of it today. Sharing food on dates, cooking for someone you're interested in, wearing their clothes to absorb their scent, exchanging personal items that carry our essence. The fundamental human desire to share our chemical signature with potential partners that hasn't changed. Only the methods evolved. Tonight, we're just getting started exploring how these ancient rituals shaped modern romance. The stories ahead will astonish you. Rest well, more medieval madness awaits tomorrow. Love as a means of survival. Forget everything you think you know about medieval romance. In 1200 Europe, marriage wasn't about finding your soulmate. It was about not starving to death. Picture this. A 16-year-old girl whose father just died. No inheritance laws protecting her. No job opportunities. No social safety net. Just the very real possibility of destitution, assault, or death. Marriage wasn't a choice. It was the only choice. And the church, they knew exactly how desperate people were. The Catholic Church didn't just influence medieval marriage. They owned it. Completely. In 1215, the Fourth Lateran Council declared marriage a sacrament, not a contract, not a tradition, a divine ordinance from God himself. This meant every single rule about who could marry whom came directly from church law. And here's the thing about church law. Breaking it didn't just get you in trouble with your neighbours. It got you excommunicated, cut off from salvation, damned for eternity. The rules were absolutely insane. Couples couldn't be more distantly related than seventh cousins. Think about that for a second. In a village of maybe 200 people, that eliminated almost everyone eligible. The church maintained detailed genealogical records going back generations, hunting for any blood connection that could invalidate a marriage. They called it preventing consanguinity. Really, it was about control, because every rejected marriage meant fees, dispensations, and bureaucratic power over people's most intimate decisions. Then came the bans. 3 consecutive Sundays, your marriage intentions posted on the church door like a wanted poster. Anyone could object. Anyone. That bitter neighbour who wanted your land. Your rival's mother who thought her daughter deserved better. Former lovers claiming prior contracts. The humiliation was intentional. Public announcement meant public scrutiny. And public scrutiny meant the church could gather evidence about why your marriage threatened God's plan, which usually meant it threatened someone else's financial interests. But here's what really gets me. People fought back, in the most dangerous, courageous ways imaginable. Secret marriages, midnight elopements, forged documents. They risked everything, death, exile, eternal damnation, just to choose their own partners. Take Agnes de Browse in 1208. When King John tried to force her into a political marriage, she refused. Publicly, the king confiscated her lands, imprisoned her family, and literally starved them to death. She died rather than surrender her choice. The church's sex rules were even more twisted. Married couples couldn't have relations on Sundays, holy days during Lent, Advent, or any of the roughly 200 forbidden days per year. Pregnancy meant abstinence during the entire 9 months plus 40 days after birth. Do the math, that's almost 2 years of celibacy for each child. The church literally controlled the most private moments of married life. And violations, public penance, fines, or worse. They turned intimacy into sin. Women bore the worst of it. A widow's remarriage required church approval, which usually meant paying enormous fees or accepting the husband they chose for her. Rich widows were literally kidnapped and forced into marriage because their property was too valuable to leave uncontrolled. Poor women had slightly more freedom, but only because they had nothing worth stealing. The church preached that women were spiritually equal to men. Then they wrote laws treating them like property to be redistributed. The bravest rebels were the ones who married in secret. Technically legal under church law if both parties consented, but socially catastrophic. No witnesses meant no protection, if one partner later denied the marriage. Aristocratic families would disown children who married beneath their station. But people did it anyway. Love or desperation, or just pure defiance against a system designed to crush individual choice. These secret marriages created decades of legal chaos, and occasionally they changed history completely. Consider the sheer psychological pressure. Every medieval person grew up knowing that marriage determined their survival, their children's futures, their eternal souls. The wrong choice meant poverty, social exile, and damnation. The church reinforced this terror through sermons, confessions, and public humiliations of those who broke the rules. Yet despite all this, despite the systematic crushing of personal agency, people still found ways to choose love over safety, still risked everything for the chance at happiness. The most heartbreaking part: how many love stories we'll never know. Secret marriages that stayed secret. Couples who lived as husband and wife without church approval, knowing they faced excommunication. Women who chose spinsterhood over forced marriages, accepting social death rather than physical subjugation. The historical record captures the scandals, the legal disputes, the political consequences, but the quiet acts of daily courage, the small rebellions that preserved human dignity, those disappeared into the darkness. This wasn't ancient history. This was the foundation that shaped everything that came after. The idea that marriage requires external approval, that love must be sanctioned by authority, that individual choice threatens social stability. These medieval power structures didn't disappear. They evolved, transformed, adapted to new times while preserving the same essential control. And understanding that control, understanding how people resisted it, even when resistance meant death, that's how we recognize freedom when we see it. Bed courtship, the bizarre test of virtue. Picture this. You're 19 years old. Your parents invite your potential husband over for dinner. After dessert, they suggest you both go upstairs and climb into bed together, fully clothed for the entire night while they sleep in the next room. This isn't some fever dream. This was bundling, a perfectly respectable courtship ritual that crossed the Atlantic with European settlers. And here's the thing that'll mess with your head. Everyone thought this was completely normal for centuries. Winter 1750. A farmhouse somewhere in colonial New England. The wind's howling outside. Inside, the Hartwell families gathered around their one heated room. Their daughter Mary's been courting young Thomas for 3 months now. Tonight's the night they test whether this boy's worth marrying their daughter. Mrs. Hartwell pulls out extra quilts. Mr. Hartwell checks the wooden board one more time. Because tonight, Mary and Thomas are going to spend 8 hours in bed together and prove they can resist temptation. Here's how bundling worked. The couple stays completely dressed, shoes, stockings, petticoats, breeches, everything. They lie on top of the covers or under separate blankets. Sometimes there's a wooden board down the middle of the bed, the bundling board. Think of it like an honor system with a fence. The families sleep nearby, close enough to hear whispers, close enough to know if anyone's moving around too much. And everyone pretends this is totally innocent. Just two young people, staying warm, getting acquainted. That bundling board wasn't just symbolic, it was serious furniture, carved from oak or pine, sometimes padded. Some families passed them down through generations like heirlooms. The board ran right down the centre of the bed, a physical barrier between virtue and scandal. But here's what's wild about this whole setup. It wasn't about preventing intimacy, it was about testing it. Could you lie next to someone you're attracted to for 8 hours and prove you had the self-control marriage required? That was the real test. Why did respectable families allow this? Because bundling solved 3 problems at once. First, courtship took time. Months of getting to know someone. But farmhouses were freezing. Heating multiple rooms cost serious money, firewood, coal, oil for lamps. Second, privacy was impossible. These families lived in 1 or 2 rooms. Parents, children, sometimes grandparents, all crammed together. Third, winter nights were long. Bundling gave couples hours to talk without interrupting the family's sleep. It was practical, it was economical, and somehow it was moral. But underneath the practicality, bundling was psychological warfare. Imagine you're Thomas. You've been working up courage to court Mary for months. Now you're lying 6 inches away from her. You can hear her breathing, feel the warmth from her body, smell her hair, and you absolutely cannot move closer, cannot touch her, cannot do anything that might suggest you lack the moral strength to be a good husband. The slightest impropriety, and you're out, permanently. The entire community would know. Your reputation destroyed. The families weren't just sleeping nearby, they were listening. Mothers had ears trained for rustling sheets. Fathers kept one eye open all night. Sometimes younger siblings were positioned as unofficial guards. Everyone understood the stakes. If the couple passed this test, if they could spend 8 hours together without crossing any lines, they'd proven they possessed the self-discipline marriage demanded. If they failed, well, there were consequences. Social shame, broken engagements, sometimes hasty weddings if things went too far. The pressure was intense. From an economic standpoint, bundling was genius. Heating fuel was expensive. Candles cost money. Oil for lamps drained budgets. But body heat was free. 2 people under blankets could stay warm all night without burning a single log. For families living on tight margins, farming families, craftsmen, labourers, bundling stretched resources through harsh winters. It wasn't romantic, it was survival math. Love had to happen within the boundaries of what families could afford, and bundling made courtship affordable for ordinary people. When bundling worked, it worked beautifully. Couples spent hours talking in whispers, learning each other's thoughts, dreams, fears. They'd discuss everything: family expectations, religious beliefs, how many children they wanted, what kind of home they'd build together. This wasn't casual dating. This was interview-level courtship. By morning, they knew whether they were compatible, whether they could trust each other, whether the attraction was real or just proximity. Some couples bundled for weeks before deciding. Others knew after one night. Either way, by the 1800s, bundling was dying. Victorian morality found the practice scandalous. Religious leaders condemned it from pulpits. Newspaper editorials called it primitive and indecent. The growing middle class preferred formal parlour courtship, chaperoned visits, structured social events, carefully monitored interactions. Bundling became associated with rural backwardness, poor families who couldn't afford proper courtship. By 1850, most American families had abandoned the practice entirely, but for over 2 centuries, it had been perfectly normal, respectable, even expected. As bundling faded into history, other courtship rituals were emerging. Rituals that made bundling look tame by comparison, because if you think spending the night in bed with your potential spouse was bizarre, wait until you hear about the medieval practice that required women to literally wear their lovers' bodily fluids as perfume. And no, I'm not making this up. Historical records document exactly how this worked, and why noble ladies considered it the height of romance. That's what we're exploring next. Of knights, handkerchiefs, and jousting tournaments. Picture this, a knight in gleaming armour, visor down, lance ready, but there's something else. A delicate silk handkerchief tied to his arm, not just decoration. This tiny piece of fabric could make or break reputations, could elevate a lady to heights of social glory, or destroy her standing forever. Because when a knight wore your favour into combat, he wasn't just showing affection, he was making a statement that echoed through castle walls and changed everything. The tournament grounds buzz with anticipation. Hundreds of spectators fill wooden stands, nobles in their finest silks, merchants clutching purses, children wide-eyed at the spectacle, but all eyes turn to the ladies' gallery. These women hold incredible power today. A simple nod, a dropped handkerchief, a whispered word, and they choose their champions. The knight who receives a lady's favour doesn't just get her token, he gets her trust. Her reputation rides with his. See, wearing a lady's favour wasn't casual romance, this was serious business. That handkerchief tied to armour meant the knight accepted responsibility for her honour. If he fought poorly, she looked foolish for choosing him. If he triumphed, her status soared. But here's the twist. Married women could give favours too, because this wasn't about sexual desire. It was about something deeper, something that would revolutionise how medieval society thought about love itself. They called it courtly love. Courtly love changed everything. Suddenly knights could pursue elaborate, passionate relationships with noble ladies, provided they never consummated them. Sounds backwards, right? But this created space for genuine emotion in a world of arranged marriages. A knight could write poetry, send gifts, perform heroic deeds, all for a woman he could never truly have. The longing became the point. The impossibility made it pure. At least that was the theory. Reality was messier. Enter our nameless knight. History doesn't give us his name, but chroniclers recorded his story because it shocked everyone. He was young, skilled with a sword, but poor, no lands, no title beyond his spurs, and he'd fallen completely, desperately in love with a married countess. She was beautiful, powerful, untouchable. Her husband commanded armies. This should have been impossible, but at the summer tournament of 1387, everything changed with one bold gesture. The countess appeared in the gallery, wearing deep blue silk. Our knight had served her household for months, writing terrible poetry, practicing his lute, generally making a fool of himself. Then she did something unprecedented. She removed her white silk veil, not her handkerchief, her actual veil, and threw it down to him. The crowd gasped. Married women giving veils to unmarried knights. This crossed lines. But he caught it, kissed it publicly, and tied it to his helm. The tournament exploded into chaos. He fought like a man possessed, unhorsed 3 opponents, shattered lances left and right. The countess watched from above, her face flushed with pride and terror. Her husband sat stone-faced beside her. With each victory, the crowd cheered louder. But they weren't just cheering skill. They were witnessing something dangerous, a public declaration that love mattered more than social order, that passion could trump politics. When the dust settled, our knight had won the day. But victories have consequences. The countess became the talk of every noble household for miles. Some whispered she was virtuous, inspiring knightly devotion. Others suggested something more scandalous. Her husband faced impossible choices: punish his wife for encouraging a knight's public worship, or accept that courtly love meant his honour remained intact as long as nothing physical happened. Medieval marriage was complicated. The knight's bold act transformed both their positions overnight. She gained a reputation for inspiring great deeds, dangerous territory for a married woman. He became legendary but landless still. Courtly love's cruel paradox. Success in love meant permanent separation. He could never approach her privately, never touch her, never claim reward beyond her public acknowledgement. Yet somehow, this impossible love became the template for romance across Europe. The broader impact was staggering. Courtly love gave medieval society a pressure valve. Arranged marriages secured political alliances, but courtly love allowed emotional expression. Knights could channel passion into poetry, tournaments, crusades. Ladies could experience devotion without threatening their marriages. The church tolerated it because unconsummated love was technically pure. Everyone pretended the system worked perfectly. Everyone knew it didn't. Hearts rarely follow rules. That white silk veil changed more than 2 lives. It symbolized love's power to transform social order, if only temporarily. Our nameless knight carried that veil into future battles, died wearing it years later in some forgotten skirmish. The countess kept his memory alive through patronage of troubadours, who sang his story. Medieval romance wasn't about happy endings. It was about beautiful impossibility, about finding meaning in longing itself. Marriage and sacred vows, a tangled affair. Picture a sunny morning in 1463, outside St. Margaret's Church in York. A crowd gathers for what should be a simple wedding ceremony. The bride wears blue, because white won't become fashionable for another 4 centuries. The groom fidgets with his belt. Both families eye each other warily. See, this isn't just about love. This is about land, money, bloodlines. And in a few minutes, something's going to go very wrong. Something that will end up in church courts for the next 3 years. Medieval marriages happened outside church doors for a reason. The ceremony needed witnesses. Lots of them, because the exact words spoken during these vows carried the force of law. Get the phrasing wrong, and you might accidentally create a marriage that couldn't be undone, or fail to create one at all. The priest would ask specific questions. The couple would respond with very specific words, and everyone would listen carefully, because later, in court, these witnesses might need to remember exactly what was said, word for word. The church recognized 2 types of marriage consent. Verba de presenti, words of present consent. I marry you, or I take you as my wife. Speak these words with a witness, and congratulations, you're immediately legally married. No priest required. Then there's verba de futur, future consent. I will marry you, or I promise to wed you. This creates a betrothal. Binding, yes, but breakable under certain circumstances. The difference between I do and I will could determine your entire future. Choose your words carefully. Now, back to our ceremony in York. The couple we're watching, they're not the problem. It's the woman standing near the church wall, pale as winter snow. Her name is Eleanor Butler, and she's watching the man she believes is her husband marry someone else. 3 years ago, Eleanor claims this same groom whispered different words to her, in private, with different witnesses. And according to church law, if she's telling the truth, then this entire ceremony is invalid. The bride would be unmarried. The groom would be a bigamist. Eleanor's story goes like this. Summer of 1460. She was 17, recently widowed, wealthy in her own right. He was charming, ambitious, politically connected. They met at court during a feast. He pursued her relentlessly, passionate letters, expensive gifts, promises of devotion. Then one evening, in her private chambers, with only her trusted maid as witness, he took her hands and said those crucial words, "I, Edward, take thee Eleanor to my wedded wife," present tense, legally binding, or so she believed. But Edward had bigger plans, much bigger plans. See, this Edward isn't just any groom, he's Edward of York, soon to be King Edward IV of England. And Eleanor Butler, she's a bishop's daughter with a dangerous secret, because if her marriage claim is valid, then Edward's very public wedding today to Elizabeth Woodville is meaningless. Their children would be illegitimate. The entire royal succession would be thrown into chaos. This isn't just a lover's quarrel, this is a constitutional crisis waiting to happen. And Eleanor knows it. The question is, what's she planning to do about it? The ceremony continues. Edward and Elizabeth exchange their carefully scripted vows. But Eleanor steps forward. She doesn't shout or make a scene. Instead, she speaks clearly, loudly enough for the required witnesses. "I object to this marriage." The crowd goes silent. The priest freezes, because objections during wedding ceremonies aren't just dramatic moments, they're legal proceedings. Eleanor has just triggered an ecclesiastical investigation. Church courts will need to examine her claim, interview witnesses, review evidence, and until they reach a verdict, Edward's marriage status remains unclear. Think about that for a second. The stakes couldn't be higher. If Eleanor proves her case, she becomes Queen of England. If she fails, well, challenging a king's marriage publicly is essentially treason. Her life is on the line, but here's what makes this fascinating. Eleanor has evidence. Love letters in Edward's handwriting, her maid's testimony, details about private conversations only a true wife would know. And there's something else, something that makes her claim particularly credible. Edward has a pattern of secret marriages. This isn't his first questionable romantic entanglement, not even his second. The church court meets in secret, too politically sensitive for public hearings. Eleanor presents her case with remarkable precision. She remembers specific dates, exact conversations, intimate details. Her maid testifies under oath about what she witnessed. But Edward's lawyers fight back. They argue the words were taken out of context, that no official ceremony took place, that Eleanor misunderstood his intentions. They present character witnesses who swear Eleanor was prone to romantic fantasies. The case becomes a battle of credibility. Who's telling the truth, and who has more to lose by lying? Months pass. The investigation drags on. Meanwhile, Edward rules as king, but his marriage remains under a cloud. Elizabeth Woodville bears him children, but their legitimacy hangs in the balance. Eleanor waits, and then something unexpected happens. New evidence emerges. A witness comes forward with information that changes everything. Not about Eleanor's marriage, but about another secret relationship. Edward, it seems, has been even busier than anyone suspected, and this revelation will shake the very foundations of the English monarchy. But that witness, they're about to say something extraordinary. The witness enters the chamber. It's a priest from Canterbury. He's nervous, sweating despite the cool air. In his hands he carries a document that will either destroy Eleanor's case or confirm it beyond any doubt. The judge orders him to speak. The priest clears his throat and begins, "My lords, I must confess that I have knowledge of another matter. Before his marriage to Lady Butler, before his marriage to Lady Woodville, King Edward exchanged vows with yet another woman." The chamber erupts. But who is this third woman? And what does this mean for England's crown, the dowry beyond its monetary worth? Here's the brutal truth about medieval marriage. Love, that was a luxury. What really mattered was the dowry, the cold, hard cash and property that came with every bride. We're not talking about a nice wedding gift here. We're talking about economic transactions that could make or break entire families. Land deeds, livestock inventories, gold coins counted twice. Because in a world where women couldn't inherit directly, The dowry was their only shot at financial security. And men, well, they knew exactly what that was worth. So what exactly went into a medieval dowry? Picture this. A wealthy merchant's daughter in 1200 England might bring 12 acres of fertile farmland, 20 sheep, 2 milk cows, a chest of silver coins, household linens, maybe even a mill or shop. That's not pocket change. That's generational wealth. A knight's daughter? Her dowry could include armour, horses, and the rights to collect taxes from specific villages. Poor families scraped together what they could. A pig, some chickens, maybe hand-woven cloth. But here's the thing, without a dowry, no marriage, period. This system turned women into walking bank accounts. And everyone knew it. Fathers calculated their daughter's worth down to the last sheep. Potential husbands? They weren't looking for love. They were checking inventory lists. A beautiful woman with no dowry was considered unmarriageable. An ugly woman with vast lands, queue of suitors around the block. It's harsh, but that's how it worked. Women became commodities in a market where their value was measured in acres and livestock. They had no say in the pricing, no control over the sale, just merchandise. But here's where it gets interesting. Widows. They were the wild cards in this whole system. When a woman's husband died, she inherited what was called the widow's dower, usually 1/3 of his entire estate. Suddenly this woman who'd been someone's property became an independent landowner, free to make her own decisions, control her own wealth. And that terrified everyone, because wealthy widows were incredibly powerful. They could choose their own husbands, or, and this was revolutionary, choose not to remarry at all. That kind of independence was dangerous, especially to kings who wanted to control land distribution. Enter Lucy of Bolingbroke. This woman's story will blow your mind. By 1136, Lucy had been widowed 3 times. 3 times. Each husband had left her wealthier than the last. She owned vast estates across England, collected rents from hundreds of tenants, had more disposable income than most earls, and King Henry I. He was watching her very closely, because every time a wealthy widow like Lucy remarried, it meant redistributing massive amounts of land to her new husband's family. Kings used these marriages to reward loyal supporters, but Lucy had other plans. She wanted to stay single, and that was about to cost her. So Lucy did something absolutely unprecedented. She walked into King Henry's court and offered him 500 marks. 500 marks. 500, to put that in perspective, that's roughly what a skilled knight earned in several years of service. It's more than most nobles saw in a lifetime. Lucy essentially bought her freedom, paid the king an enormous bribe for the privilege of remaining unmarried. And Henry, he took the money, because apparently even royal greed had its price. But this deal reveals something crucial about how the system really worked. Women's autonomy was for sale. If you were rich enough, why did kings care so much about who wealthy widows married? Simple, land was power. In medieval England, almost all wealth came from land ownership. Controlling who married whom meant controlling who gained access to that wealth. When a widow remarried, her new husband effectively controlled her property. Kings used these strategic marriages to reward military service, secure political alliances, even punish enemies by forcing them into disadvantageous matches. Lucy's independence threatened that entire system. A wealthy woman making her own choices? That was dangerous precedent. Other women might get ideas, other families might lose control of their daughters' marriages. The economics were ruthless. Let's say Lucy owned estates worth 2,000 marks. If she remarried, her new husband gained control of that wealth. His family rose in power. His political influence expanded. His military resources increased. But if Lucy stayed single, that wealth remained unattached, not benefiting any male bloodline, not creating new political alliances, just sitting there controlled by a woman. Kings saw this as wasted resources, missed opportunities. That's why they pressured wealthy widows so aggressively. Every unmarried wealthy woman represented unclaimed political capital, money and land not being properly redistributed to men who could use it strategically. Here's the twisted irony. Poor women actually had more freedom than rich ones. A peasant girl with no dowry, her marriage barely mattered to anyone beyond her immediate family. She could often choose her husband, work to save her own modest dowry, even delay marriage for years. But wealthy women, they were too valuable to have choices. Their marriages were state business, family business, everything except personal business. The more money a woman brought to marriage, the less control she had over her own life. Wealth meant value, value meant control, and control was always in male hands. The dowry system created this perverse situation where women's worth was entirely external. They didn't own their value, they were their value. A woman's intelligence, personality, dreams, talents, completely irrelevant. What mattered was what she brought to the marriage market. Her father's wealth, her inheritance rights, the political connections her family offered. Women internalized this. They measured themselves by their dowries, competed with other women based on property values. Some wealthy women like Lucy eventually figured out how to game the system. But for most, they remained trapped inside an economy that treated them as merchandise. Lucy's payment changed nothing and everything. The system continued. Wealthy women remained valuable commodities. Kings kept controlling marriages for political gain. But Lucy proved something important. With enough money, even women could buy freedom. It was expensive freedom, limited freedom, freedom that required enormous wealth and royal permission, but freedom nonetheless. Her story reveals the medieval world's ultimate truth about women and power. Agency wasn't impossible. It was just for sale, at a price most women could never afford. Sweet dreams, knowing that sometimes, even in the darkest systems, people found ways to write their own endings. Love tokens, binding symbols of adoration. Picture a young woman in 1340, carefully embroidering her lover's initials onto a silk handkerchief. This isn't just romantic craft time. This handkerchief will become legal evidence, a binding contract, a promise that could save her life or destroy it completely. Medieval love tokens weren't cute gestures. They were sacred symbols that literally bound couples together before God and law. Tonight we're exploring the most powerful objects in medieval romance. Rings, belts, brooches, each one carrying enough symbolic weight to start wars. The most famous love token? The Fede ring. 2 hands clasped together, carved in gold or silver. Simple design, profound meaning. When a man placed this on a woman's finger, he wasn't just proposing, he was literally giving her his hand, his word, his honor. The handshake that sealed business deals, land purchases, peace treaties, that same gesture, frozen forever in metal. Italian goldsmiths perfected these rings in the 13th century. The inscription often read, Fede, meaning faith, because that's what marriage required, complete, unwavering faith. But here's what makes Fede rings fascinating. They evolved. The early versions showed just clasped hands. Then craftsmen added hearts. Then crowns. By the Renaissance, you'd see elaborate rings with hands holding a crowned heart. The Claddagh ring, still worn today. Hands for friendship, heart for love, crown for loyalty. The way you wore it mattered. Heart pointing toward your fingertips meant you were available. Heart pointing toward your wrist meant you were taken. Simple ring orientation. Life-changing message. Medieval dating status, literally on display. Love belts tell an even more intimate story. Medieval women wore girdles, decorative belts that symbolized their virginity. Giving your belt to a suitor, that was serious. It meant you trusted him with your most precious possession, your purity, your future. These weren't flimsy cloth strips. Think elaborate metalwork, precious stones, intricate engravings. Some had small purses attached for carrying prayer books or medicinal herbs. The belt of the Virgin Mary was Christianity's most sacred relic, childbirth protection, fertility blessing. When a woman gave her belt away, she was sharing that power. Then we have the posy rings, tiny bands inscribed with romantic poetry. You and no other. Love me and leave me not. My heart you have, my heart you keep. Short phrases that packed emotional punch. These weren't expensive jewelry. Working people could afford them. A blacksmith could inscribe his sweetheart's ring. A merchant's daughter could wear her beloved's words. The inscriptions were often in Norman French, the language of romance. Because English was still considered too crude for love poetry, your feelings literally written in the language of the heart. Brooches served as portable art galleries of devotion. Heart-shaped, bird-shaped. Some featured lovers meeting under trees. Others showed courtly scenes, knights kneeling before ladies. The symbolism was layered. Birds represented souls in flight toward heaven. Trees meant fertility and growth. Flowers indicated specific emotions. Roses for passion, violets for faithfulness, forget-me-nots for true love and remembrance. When a woman pinned her lover's brooch to her dress, she was wearing his story, his hopes, his promises. Every guest at court could read the romantic narrative displayed on her clothing. Hair jewelry represents perhaps the most personal love tokens. Braided locks worn in lockets, intricate patterns woven into bracelets. This wasn't just romantic, it was magical. Medieval people believed hair contained life force. Giving someone your hair meant giving them power over your soul. Dangerous magic. Beautiful risk. Lovers would commission goldsmiths to create elaborate settings for hair keepsakes. Miniature portraits surrounded by braided strands. The ultimate intimacy, carrying a piece of your beloved's essence wherever you went. Love made literally tangible, touchable, permanent. Sleeve favours were the most public love tokens. Silk scarves, embroidered handkerchiefs, pieces of fabric torn from a lady's dress. Knights would tie these to their armour during tournaments. Wearing your heart on your sleeve wasn't just an expression, it was literal medieval practice. Everyone in the stands knew whose colours you wore, whose honour you carried. Win spectacularly, and you elevated her reputation. Lose shamefully, and you embarrassed her before hundreds of witnesses. The pressure was enormous. Your performance reflected directly on her judgment in choosing you as champion. The most elaborate tokens were devotional books, prayer manuscripts customized for lovers, illuminated with their initials intertwined, saints who protected marriage, romantic poetry disguised as religious verse. These books of ours cost fortunes, months of a scribe's work, gold leaf, hand-painted miniatures, but they served dual purposes. Public respectability, nobody questioned a lady reading her prayers. Private romance, every page reminded her of her beloved's devotion. Sacred and profane love, beautifully bound together, the perfect courtship gift for a deeply religious age that still believed in passion. Mirror cases deserve special mention. Polished metal mirrors were luxury items. The cases often featured romantic scenes, lovers exchanging vows, sharing meals, dancing together. But mirrors held deeper meaning. They revealed truth, inner beauty. When a knight gave his lady an ornate mirror case, he was saying she was worth seeing clearly, worth reflecting on, worth contemplating. The mirror would show her face, but the decorated case would remind her daily of his feelings. Every time she checked her appearance, she'd see his love surrounding her reflection. These love tokens weren't just gifts, they were binding contracts written in gold, silk and stone. Courts recognized them as evidence in marriage disputes. A feathered ring proved betrothal. A belt exchange indicated serious intentions. Break your promise and these tokens became weapons against you. But honour your commitment, and these same objects became family heirlooms, passed down through generations, tangible proof that once upon a time, in a world of arranged marriages and political alliances, real love found a way to flourish. Sweet dreams, knowing romance has always been worth the risk. Scandalous secret marriages. Picture this, a widowed queen, alone in her chambers, making a choice that would topple everything. No witnesses, no ceremony, just whispered vows in the dead of night that would reshape the English crown forever. What I'm about to tell you sounds like fiction, but it's documented history, a secret so dangerous that when it finally surfaced, it didn't just scandal the court, it created an entirely new royal dynasty, the Tudor dynasty, and it all started with one forbidden love affair that nobody was supposed to know about. Ready? This gets wild. Catherine of Valois, French princess, widowed Queen of England, mother to the future King Henry VI. By all accounts, she should have lived quietly, raising her son, staying out of politics. That's what widowed queens were supposed to do. But Catherine had a problem. She was young, beautiful, and completely isolated at the English court. The nobles watched her every move. Any remarriage needed royal approval. Any hint of romance could be seen as treason. She was trapped in golden cage, expected to mourn forever. But Catherine had other plans. Enter Owen Tudor, a Welsh squire. Nobody special by court standards. Definitely nobody who should be anywhere near a queen. He served in Catherine's household, probably as a member of her guard or steward. Some sources say he was handsome. Others suggest he was clever, charming. But here's what matters. Somehow, this commoner caught the eye of the most powerful woman in England. And she looked back. This wasn't supposed to happen. Queens didn't marry squires, ever. But Catherine was about to break every rule in the book. The attraction was forbidden from the start. Catherine outranked Owen by every measure imaginable. Royal blood versus Welsh gentry, French princess versus English subject, widowed queen versus household servant. If anyone discovered their relationship, Owen would face execution for treason. Catherine could lose her son, her title, everything, but somehow behind closed doors, away from prying eyes, something real developed between them. Secret glances during court ceremonies, whispered conversations in empty corridors, a love affair that could destroy both their lives. And they didn't care. The secret marriage happened sometime around 1428. No grand ceremony, no witnesses from the nobility, possibly no witnesses at all. Medieval law only required mutual consent, spoken before God to create a valid marriage. So Catherine and Owen exchanged vows in private, probably in her chambers, creating a union that was legally binding but politically explosive. They told no one, not the court, not the nobles, not even Catherine's young son, the king. For years they lived as husband and wife, while pretending to be queen and servant, the most dangerous masquerade in English history. Keeping the secret required incredible discipline. Catherine continued her public duties as Dowager Queen. Owen maintained his position as a minor courtier. They couldn't show affection publicly, couldn't acknowledge their relationship, couldn't even hint at their connection. But behind palace walls they were building a life together, a real marriage. And here's where the story gets even more incredible. They started having children, multiple children, royal bastards, technically, since the marriage was unacknowledged. Each birth risked exposure. Each pregnancy could have revealed everything, but somehow they kept their family hidden from the entire English court. Their children were raised in complete secrecy. Edmund Tudor, Jasper Tudor, Owen Tudor the younger, possibly a daughter named Margaret. Think about this. These were the king's half-siblings, growing up as anonymous household members. No royal titles, no acknowledgement of their bloodline, just quiet children in the shadows of power. Catherine somehow managed to explain their presence without revealing their parentage. Maybe they were presented as orphans she'd taken in, maybe as distant relatives. The records are deliberately vague, because admitting the truth would have meant revealing the secret that could topple the crown. Catherine died in 1437, taking the secret to her grave, but death couldn't keep their story hidden forever. King Henry VI, Catherine's son from her first marriage, discovered the truth about his mother's secret family. Instead of rage, he showed remarkable mercy. He ensured his half-brothers were educated, cared for, given opportunities. Edmund and Jasper Tudor became his loyal servants, devoted to protecting the crown their mother had risked everything to keep stable. But Henry had no idea what he'd just unleashed. By legitimizing the Tudor brothers, he was setting the stage for his own dynasty's eventual downfall. The Tudor brothers rose through the ranks with quiet determination. Edmund became Earl of Richmond. Jasper became Earl of Pembroke. They served Henry VI loyally through the chaos of the Wars of the Roses, that bloody civil war between the houses of York and Lancaster. Edmund married Margaret Beaufort, a descendant of Edward III. When Edmund died young, Margaret was pregnant. Their son would be born into a world torn by war, with virtually no claim to the throne, just another minor noble in a kingdom full of them. Except that baby was Henry Tudor, the future Henry VII, the founder of the Tudor dynasty. Henry Tudor's path to the throne was impossibly unlikely. His claim came through his mother's Beaufort line, a lineage that had been legitimized but specifically barred from royal succession. His Welsh heritage through Owen Tudor meant nothing to English nobles. He spent years in exile, a forgotten prince with no real power. But when Richard III's reign became unpopular, Henry emerged as the alternative. At the Battle of Bosworth Field in 1485, this descendant of a secret marriage defeated the last Plantagenet king and claimed the English crown. Catherine and Owen's forbidden love had created the most powerful dynasty in English history. The Tudor dynasty ruled England for over a century. Henry VII, Henry VIII, Edward VI, Mary I, Elizabeth I, some of the most famous monarchs in history, all descended from a secret marriage that should never have happened. Catherine of Valois broke every rule of royal behaviour, risked everything for love, and accidentally created the bloodline that would reshape England forever. Her great-granddaughter Elizabeth would become the most powerful queen in English history, all because one widowed queen decided to follow her heart instead of political expectations. Sometimes the biggest secrets change everything. Sweet dreams, knowing love really can conquer kingdoms. Lawsuits and love, the bittersweet bond. Medieval courtrooms weren't just for theft and murder. They were ground zero for the messiest relationship drama you can imagine. Picture this: angry nobles storming into church courts, waiving marriage contracts, demanding justice for broken promises. Ladies suing knights who ghosted them after passionate declarations. Knights countersuing when betrothed women ran off with someone richer. These weren't small claims court disputes. These were cases that could destroy reputations, bankrupt families, and literally rewrite the inheritance laws of entire kingdoms. Love, it turns out, has always been legally complicated. The medieval legal system recognized something we'd find shocking today: verbal contracts for marriage. No paperwork needed. Just say the right words in front of witnesses, and boom, you're legally married. But here's where it gets messy. What exactly counted as the right words? I will marry you versus I marry you. Present tense versus future tense. That tiny grammatical difference could make or break a case. Lawyers built entire careers on parsing the exact phrasing lovers used during romantic moments. Imagine having your pillow talk scrutinized in open court by hostile attorneys. Enter Lusanna, a gorgeous Florentine widow with serious money and even more serious legal problems. She claimed Giovanni della Casa married her through an exchange of rings and sacred vows. Giovanni. He insisted it was just a casual betrothal. Meanwhile, he'd already married someone else in a big public ceremony. Lousanna dragged him to ecclesiastical court, demanding recognition as his true wife. The stakes: his new marriage would be void, his reputation destroyed, and Lousanna would inherit everything. The case consumed Florence's gossip networks for months. Medieval TMZ at its finest. The evidence in these love lawsuits was absolutely wild. Lousanna's lawyers presented witnesses who swore they heard Giovanni say, "I marry you," not "I will marry you." They brought the actual ring he gave her, analysed the inscription, questioned servants about bedroom conversations. Giovanni's defence team argued the whole thing was a setup, a gold digger targeting a wealthy merchant. They claimed Lousanna coached witnesses and fabricated evidence. The judges had to determine not just what happened, but what people intended when it happened. Medieval lie detector tests weren't exactly scientific, but the most explosive marriage lawsuit in medieval history involved a queen, Catherine of Valois, widow of King Henry V of England, had secretly married Owen Tudor, a Welsh squire. No royal permission, no public ceremony, no witnesses beyond her household staff. When the secret came out, the political implications were staggering. Queens weren't supposed to remarry without the king's consent, especially not to commoners. The crown could seize her lands, exile her children, or worse. Catherine's defence: she claimed God recognised their marriage, even if the crown didn't. Sacred law versus royal law. Owen Tudor found himself in an impossible legal position. Married to the former Queen of England, but with no proof of the ceremony, no marriage contract, no church records, just 4 children as evidence that something significant had happened between them. When Catherine died in 1437, Owen had no legal claim to her property, no protection from royal persecution, and no way to prove his children were legitimate heirs. The crown could have executed him for treason. Instead, King Henry VI quietly granted Owen English citizenship and supported his half-siblings, mercy disguised as legal pragmatism. The irony? Owen Tudor's secret marriage lawsuit, or rather, the complete absence of one, created the Tudor dynasty. His grandson Henry Tudor would defeat Richard III at the Battle of Bosworth Field and become Henry VII, all because a widowed queen chose love over legal protocol. Catherine of Valois broke every rule of royal marriage, faced potential exile and disgrace, yet her forbidden romance ultimately placed her descendants on the English throne. Sometimes the most dangerous lawsuits are the ones that never make it to court. Sometimes silence speaks louder than any legal document. Not all romantic lawsuits ended in triumph. Consider the case of Alice Perrers, mistress to King Edward III, who found herself in legal hell when the king died. Parliament accused her of manipulating royal justice, stealing crown jewels, and illegally influencing court decisions through her romantic relationship. Alice faced charges that could result in exile and complete financial ruin. Her defense lawyers argued she was just a woman in love who received gifts from her devoted partner. The prosecution painted her as a calculating seductress who corrupted the entire English legal system for personal gain. Medieval marriage lawsuits revealed the brutal economics underlying romantic relationships. When Lady Margaret Beaufort was widowed at age 6, yes, 6, various men filed competing legal claims to marry her and control her massive inheritance. These weren't love suits. They were hostile corporate takeovers disguised as romantic pursuits. Lawyers argued over who had stronger contractual rights to a child's future consent. Margaret would eventually marry 4 times, each union carefully negotiated through legal contracts that prioritized property rights over personal feelings. Romance through legal documentation. How absolutely medieval. The church courts handling these marriage disputes operated under canon law, which often contradicted secular legal codes. A marriage valid under church law might be illegal under royal decree. Couples found themselves legally married in God's eyes, but criminally liable under state authority. Eleanor of Aquitaine's marriage to Louis VII was annulled by church courts for consanguinity, being too closely related, but her subsequent marriage to Henry II faced the exact same blood relationship issues. Medieval legal systems couldn't decide which relationships God approved and which ones threatened political stability. These medieval love lawsuits established legal precedents we still use today. The concept that marriage requires mutual consent, that verbal contracts can be legally binding, that emotional manipulation can void agreements, all emerged from desperate lovers arguing their cases in dusty courtrooms. Catherine of Valois and Owen Tudor's secret marriage proved that love could triumph over law if you were willing to risk everything. Their romance sparked no immediate lawsuits, but it rewrote English history. Sometimes the greatest legal victories happen outside the courtroom entirely. Love finding its own jurisdiction. Fede rings, witness to unspoken promises. Picture holding a ring that wasn't just jewelry, it was a contract. More binding than any modern prenup. More sacred than any legal document. In medieval times, when you slipped a fede ring onto someone's finger, you weren't just saying, "I love you." You were saying, "I bind my life, my property, my future to yours." The clasped hands carved into gold weren't decorative. They were witnesses, silent guardians of promises that could destroy kingdoms if broken. Tonight, we uncover the secret language these rings once spoke so fluently. The word fed comes from Italian faith, but not the gentle Sunday school kind. This was ironclad trust. When medieval lovers exchanged fede rings, they weren't making romantic gestures. They were entering legal contracts. See those tiny carved hands shaking? That handshake sealed property transfers, inheritance rights, political alliances. Break that promise, and you didn't just lose love, you lost everything. Your lands, your title, sometimes your life, makes our modern engagements look like playground promises, doesn't it? These rings meant business, deadly serious business that could topple dynasties if someone changed their mind. Here's what blows my mind about these rings. They weren't hidden symbols. Everyone could read them. Walk into any medieval marketplace and people would glance at your hands, instantly knowing your relationship status, your family connections, even your approximate wealth. The quality of gold told them your social class. The style revealed which region you came from. And those clasped hands, they announced to the world that someone had claimed you, that you were bound by promises more sacred than anything we understand today. Your ring was your resume, your dating profile, and your legal document all rolled into one. But fetid rings held darker secrets too. Some featured hidden compartments, tiny spaces where lovers could conceal messages, or poison. Yeah, poison. When marriage was politics and politics was war, rings became weapons. A jealous spouse could eliminate rivals with a handshake. A poison ring pressed against skin during an embrace. The same hands that symbolized eternal faith could deliver eternal silence. Makes you wonder how many sudden illnesses in medieval courts were actually murder by ring. These weren't just love tokens, they were instruments of power, and sometimes instruments of death. The craftsmanship tells its own story. Master goldsmiths spent months creating single fed rings. Every finger joint on those tiny hands was perfectly articulated, every nail carefully etched. Some featured hearts hidden between the palms, only visible when the ring was removed. Others had inscriptions so small you needed magnifying tools to read them. Latin prayers, secret names, dates that marked forbidden encounters. These weren't mass-produced symbols. They were bespoke promises, custom-made contracts between souls. Each ring unique as the love, or political arrangement, it represented. The care lavished on them reveals how seriously people took these bonds. Women wore these rings differently than we wear engagement rings today, not necessarily on the ring finger. Medieval people believed different fingers connected to different organs. The thumb connected to Venus, passion and desire. The index finger connected to Jupiter, power and authority. Choose wrong, and you sent the wrong message entirely. A fed ring on the thumb said, I'm available for passionate affairs. On the index finger, I'm marking my territory through political marriage. The middle finger connected to Saturn, wisdom and responsibility. Each placement was a public declaration. Your finger choice told the world exactly what kind of relationship you were advertising. Here's where it gets really interesting. Some feather rings were designed to break apart, split into two separate bands that each lover would wear. Only when reunited would the clasped hands appear complete. Imagine the symbolism. Your ring felt incomplete without your partner's matching piece. The hands reached toward emptiness until both lovers were present. If one person died, the surviving partner wore a ring of reaching, grasping hands that would never find their match again. It's heartbreaking when you think about it. These rings physically embodied the incompleteness people felt when separated from their chosen partner. Beautiful and tragic simultaneously. The Catholic Church initially banned fede rings, too pagan, too reminiscent of Roman marriage customs, where couples clasped hands during ceremonies. But people wouldn't give them up. The symbolism was too powerful. Eventually the Church surrendered and blessed the practice. They added Christian inscriptions, quod Deus conjunxit homo non separat. What God has joined, let no man separate. Same rings, same clasped hands, but now sanctified by holy approval. It's fascinating how traditions survive by adapting. These rings outlasted empires by simply changing their religious branding while keeping their essential meaning intact. Faith adapting to faith, you might say. Renaissance lovers elevated feather rings to art forms. They commissioned rings featuring their actual hands, cast in miniature from life. Imagine proposing with a ring that literally held tiny sculptures of your intertwined fingers. The ultimate personalized promise. Some rings featured moving parts, mechanical hands that would clasp together when you twisted the band. Others opened to reveal hidden scenes, couples embracing, heart-piercing arrows, even erotic imagery for private viewing. These weren't just rings anymore, they were intimate theatres, personal museums of desire that lived on lovers' hands. Each ring told a story only the couple fully understood. But here's what haunts me about fede rings. They were often the only thing left after everything else was lost. Wars destroyed castles, plagues killed families, revolutions seized fortunes. But rings survived, buried with bodies, hidden in walls, passed through generations who forgot their original stories. Archaeologists find them in medieval graves, those tiny clasped hands still holding their eternal grip hundreds of years later. The flesh rotted away, the love stories were forgotten, but the promises carved in gold endured. Makes you wonder what commitments our modern rings will witness, long after we're gone. What promises will outlast us? So next time you see an engagement ring, remember the fede rings that came before. Those weren't just pretty symbols. They were contracts written in gold, promises that bound not just hearts, but entire futures together. The hands that shook in greeting became hands that held through everything: life, death, wealth, poverty, political upheaval. Medieval lovers understood something we've forgotten. Commitment wasn't just an emotion, it was a choice, a daily decision to keep holding on. Those clasped hands weren't celebrating a feeling, they were promising an action. Maybe that's what real love looks like, hands that refuse to let go. Elaborate feasts and courting techniques. Picture this, you're invited to dinner, but this isn't just any meal. This is a carefully orchestrated performance, where every dish carries meaning, every course sends a message, and the dessert? Well, that might just be a marriage proposal. In Renaissance Europe, wealthy families turned courtship into culinary theatre. The more elaborate the feast, the more serious the romantic intentions. We're talking multiple courses, exotic spices, sugar sculptures that cost more than most people's annual wages. because nothing said marry me quite like bankrupting yourself over dinner. The planning started weeks in advance. Italian merchant families would spend fortunes importing cinnamon from Ceylon, saffron from Spain, sugar from Cyprus. The menu became a coded love letter. Roasted peacock, with gilded feathers, symbolized nobility and beauty. Marzipan shaped into hearts and flowers, spelled out romantic intentions. Even the table arrangement mattered. Seating the potential bride near the host family's coat of arms, that was strategic placement. Her parents would arrive knowing exactly what this invitation meant. This wasn't dinner. This was a business proposal disguised as hospitality. Receiving the invitation was like getting struck by lightning. Your daughter has been chosen. The most eligible bachelor in the district wants to court her through the ancient ritual of the feast. But here's the thing. Once you accepted that invitation, you were basically agreeing to serious marriage negotiations. There was no casual dining when dowries were involved. Families would gather in hushed conferences, calculating what this meant. Could they afford to reciprocate with an equally impressive feast? What if their daughter rejected the proposal? The social consequences would ripple through their entire community for years. The pressure was insane. Everyone knew what was happening. Extended family, neighbours, business partners, they'd all find excuses to drop by during the feast preparation, fishing for details. Oh, you're serving swan. How significant. The bride-to-be became a nervous wreck. Her entire future hung on how she handled herself during one meal. Smile too much? Too eager. Not enough. Ungrateful. Her parents coached her on proper responses, acceptable conversation topics, even how to hold her wine cup, because one wrong move could destroy months of careful negotiations and leave the family humiliated. The feast itself was pure spectacle. Servants processed through the great hall carrying platters like religious processions. Roasted meats glazed with honey and gold leaf. Fresh fruits carved into impossible shapes. Wine that cost more per bottle than a craftsman's monthly earnings. The abundance was intentional. It demonstrated the suitor's ability to provide for a wife and future children. Every guest understood they were witnessing a display of wealth designed to impress one specific person. The potential bride sat in the seat of honor, overwhelmed by the grandeur arranged entirely for her benefit. Reading the signs required expertise. Was she eating heartily? Good sign showed she felt comfortable and welcomed the courtship. Picking at her food, disaster. Her parents would exchange meaningful glances across the table, interpreting every gesture. When the suitor's father raised his cup in her direction, that was the opening move. When special delicacies were placed directly in front of her, that was escalation. The most expensive dishes were saved for last, building toward the moment when serious intentions would finally be spoken aloud. Everyone held their breath, waiting for the crucial conversation to begin. Then came the moment of truth. Usually during the final course, after hours of careful conversation and subtle gestures, the suitor or his father would stand, cup in hand, and address her directly. Our families have been blessed by friendship. Perhaps that friendship could grow deeper. Flowery language, but everyone knew what he meant. This was the formal proposal for marriage negotiations. The hall would fall silent. Servants froze mid-step. Even the kitchen noise stopped. Everything hinged on her response, or more accurately, her father's response, since he held the ultimate authority over her future. The anxiety was crushing. Those few seconds felt like hours. If her father stood to respond positively, celebrations would explode throughout the hall. But if he hesitated, if he offered diplomatic non-answers, like "we are honored by your regard," without commitment, that was gentle rejection. The suitor's family would have to save face while processing public humiliation. They'd invested enormous resources in this feast, made their intentions clear to the entire community, and now faced the mortifying possibility of having their proposal declined. The financial and social costs of rejection could be devastating. When acceptance came, The transformation was magical. Suddenly the feast became a celebration, rather than a negotiation. Musicians appeared as if by magic. Dancing began. The prospective bride and groom were formally introduced, allowed to speak directly for the first time all evening. Wine flowed more freely. The formal tension dissolved into genuine joy as both families began planning the future together. Marriage contracts would be negotiated later, but tonight was about celebrating the successful conclusion of an elaborate courtship ritual. The feast had accomplished its purpose. Two families were about to become one through strategic alliance. But rejection was brutal. The declined suitor's family would finish the meal in polite agony, maintaining dignity while their hopes crumbled. They'd return home to face their extended family's disappointment and the community's whispered gossip. Did you hear the Medici boy was turned down after that expensive feast? How embarrassing. The rejected family might withdraw from social functions for months. The girl who'd done the rejecting faced her own consequences. Word would spread that she was particular or difficult, potentially scaring off future suitors. In this world, saying no had serious social costs. These elaborate feast courtships reveal how high the stakes were in aristocratic marriage. This wasn't about romance, it was about family alliances, financial security, and social status, wrapped in the language of hospitality. The abundance displayed at these meals wasn't just showing off. It was proof of ability to provide, to protect, to maintain the lifestyle a noble bride expected. And for the families involved, every course served was an investment in their future, sometimes successful, sometimes disastrously expensive failures, but always a performance where love and money danced together on golden plates. Reveling in dance, the subtle art of courtship. Picture this: Versailles, 1680, 300 candles flickering, silk gowns swishing across marble floors, and every single movement, every turn, every glance, every step was a conversation, not words, body language. The minuet wasn't just a dance, it was flirtation disguised as etiquette. A woman's fan flutter? That meant yes. A gentleman's bow depth? That signalled his intentions. This wasn't entertainment. This was courtship choreographed to perfection. The ballroom was the original dating app. Think dancing was always about fun? Think again. In 15th century Italy, dance masters held more power than priests when it came to matchmaking. They taught young nobles secret codes. A curtsy lasting 3 beats meant interest. 2 beats, polite rejection. 1 beat meant absolutely not. Parents hired these masters not to teach their children rhythm. They hired them to teach their children how to communicate desire without speaking a word. The dance floor became a battlefield of subtle signals and hidden meanings. Here's what gets me about medieval dancing. Couples barely touched. The S&P popular across Europe involved elaborate footwork, but hands never met. Partners circled each other like cautious cats. Yet somehow this created more sexual tension than any modern grinding. Why? Because restriction breeds intensity. When a knight finally got to take his lady's hand for the final promenade, after 40 minutes of near misses and meaningful glances, that single touch felt electric. Sometimes less really is more. The Galliard changed everything. This Renaissance dance actually let couples touch, not just fingertips, full palm contact. Scandalous for the 1550s. Queen Elizabeth herself danced 6 or 7 galliards every morning before breakfast. Not for exercise, for politics. Every foreign ambassador watched how she moved, who she chose as partners, how long she held their hands. Dance became diplomacy. A queen's choice of dancing partner could signal military alliances or hint at marriage negotiations. One dance could start wars. Want to know the wildest dance rule? In 17th century France, the higher your social rank, the lower you had to bow. Seems backwards, right? But here's the genius. When a duke bowed deeper than a baron during the opening reverence, Everyone watching knew exactly who held real power. The dance floor became a visible hierarchy chart. And here's where it gets interesting for courtship. When a nobleman chose to bow extra deep to a lady of lower rank, that was a public declaration of romantic interest. Politics through posture. Spanish courtship dancing was absolutely brutal. The saraband, imported from Mexico in the 1500s, was so sexually charged that priests tried to ban it. Dancers would lock eyes, never looking away, while executing intricate steps that brought them tantalizingly close. The Inquisition actually investigated whether certain dance moves constituted sinful behavior. But here's the twist. This forbidden dance became the ultimate test of virtue. Couples who could perform it without losing control proved they possessed the self-discipline necessary for proper marriage. Temptation as character assessment. The English country dance revolution happened because Jane Austen wasn't exaggerating. Those long lines of couples weren't just pretty formations. They were strategic. While dancing, you'd interact with multiple partners as you moved up and down the set. Smart parents watched which young men their daughters smiled at during the crossing steps, which ladies lingered during the swing. The dance became a massive speed dating session disguised as innocent entertainment. 4 minutes with every eligible person in the room. Genius matchmaking through choreography. German folk dances carried secret wedding predictions. In the Schuhplattler, men would slap their leather pants and boots in complex rhythms. But here's what's wild. The better a man's rhythm, the more fertile he was considered. Women judged potential husbands by their ability to keep perfect time. Miss a beat, you might miss a wife. And the women, they'd spin faster and faster, their skirts flying higher. Not for modesty's sake, they were showing off their stamina. Dance became a physical audition for marriage compatibility. Performance as promise. Polish mazurka balls turned courtship into theatre. Couples would improvise entire conversations through movement. A sudden stop meant wait for me. Spinning in place meant confusion or hesitation. The famous mazurka heel clicks? That was pure showing off, men literally clicking their heels to impress their partners. But the real magic happened during the hopping steps, when a man could lift his partner just slightly off the ground during the hop, supporting her weight while maintaining perfect rhythm that demonstrated the strength and reliability every father wanted in a son-in-law. The waltz almost destroyed European society. Before 1800, couples had never held each other while dancing. Never. The closest contact was fingertip touches during formal processional dances. Then suddenly, arms around waists, bodies inches apart, spinning together in intimate circles. Lord Byron called it a dizzy interchange of being. Clergy denounced it as the work of the devil. But young people didn't care. For the first time in history, they could hold someone they loved in public and call it dancing. Revolution disguised as recreation. Society would never recover. Here's what amazes me about dance courtship. Every culture developed the same basic principle: use movement to communicate what words couldn't safely express. Whether it was Japanese court dance where fan positions conveyed messages, or Irish ceilidh where couple selection announced engagements, or even Native American courtship dances where young people could interact under community supervision, dance became humanity's universal language of desire. Tonight, when you see couples swaying to music, remember, they're participating in a conversation thousands of years old. Some traditions never fade, they just find new rhythms. Riddle contest. Outwitting your way into marriage. Picture this. Medieval Scandinavia. You want to marry the blacksmith's clever daughter, but there's a catch. You can't just ask her father for permission. You have to prove your wit first, because in Norse culture, intelligence mattered more than strength when choosing a life partner. The tradition? A public riddle contest. Get the riddles right, win the bride. Get them wrong, well, let's just say you'd better have a backup plan. This isn't folklore, this actually happened. The stakes couldn't be higher. We're talking about your entire future here. In a society where marriage meant survival, where choosing the wrong partner could mean starvation during harsh winters, proving your mental sharpness was literally life or death, the bride's family would gather, the whole village would watch, and you'd stand there, palms sweating, knowing that 3 riddles stood between you and happiness, or humiliation. The Norse took this seriously. Stupid husbands meant stupid children, and stupid children didn't survive Viking winters. Our suitor approaches the farmhouse on a crisp October morning. He's rehearsed this moment for weeks. The bride-to-be sits spinning wool, pretending not to notice him. Her father emerges, stern-faced, followed by the village elders. This isn't just about one marriage, it's about bloodlines, about proving this man has the wit to protect their daughter through famines, raids, and the brutal realities of medieval life. The father speaks. 3 riddles, young man. Answer all correctly, and she's yours. Fail even one. First riddle, the father announces, his voice carrying across the gathered crowd. The suitor's heart pounds. Here it comes. What has roots that nobody sees, stands taller than trees, up it goes, yet never grows. Silence. This is it, the moment that will determine his entire future. He knows the village is watching. The bride's eyes are on him. One wrong answer, and he walks away empty-handed, probably never to return. The pressure is crushing, but wait, he's got this. Mountains. The answer is mountains. Mountains, he says, trying to keep his voice steady. A slight nod from the father. Good, but they're just getting started. The crowd murmurs approval. The bride allows herself a small smile, but everyone knows the riddles get harder. This was just the warm-up. The father strokes his beard, considering his next move. This young man might actually be worthy of his daughter, but let's see how he handles the second test. The real test, because any fool can guess mountains. What comes next will separate the clever from the truly brilliant. Second riddle. The father continues, and the crowd falls silent again. Even the children stop playing. This is the moment where most suitors fail. Born in darkness, raised in light, I dance without music, fight without might. I consume all things, yet leave no trace. What am I? The suitor's mind races. This is much harder. Born in darkness, dance without music, consume all things. The seconds tick by. The bride's face shows worry now. Her father is testing not just knowledge, but the ability to think under pressure. Sweat beads on the suitor's forehead despite the cold air. Born in darkness, that could be fire. Fire is born from nothing, needs light to grow. It dances without music, flames flicker and move. Consumes all things, fire devours everything in its path, yet leaves no trace because fire itself disappears when fuel runs out. Fire, he says, voice stronger now. Another nod from the father, but this one's more respectful. The crowd shifts, 2 down, 1 to go, but everyone knows the third riddle will be the killer. The father's expression grows serious. This final riddle will determine everything. Last riddle, young man. And this one requires more than cleverness. It requires wisdom. The bride leans forward slightly. Even she doesn't know what's coming. What is the most valuable thing a man can give his wife? Yet the more he gives it, the more he has. The suitor's confidence wavers. This isn't about objects or creatures. This is about understanding marriage itself, about what makes a partnership work. The answer will reveal if he truly understands love. The suitor closes his eyes for a moment. What can you give away yet have more of? Not gold, not land, something that grows when shared. Something that makes marriages strong in a harsh world. Then it hits him. The one thing that bonds couples through Viking raids, failed harvests, and endless winters. Trust, he says quietly. The most valuable thing a man can give his wife is his trust. And the more he trusts her, the more trustworthy he becomes himself. The father's stern face breaks into a genuine smile. Welcome to the family, son. The crowd erupts in cheers. The bride rushes to her new husband's side. But this isn't just a happy ending. It's a beginning built on mutual respect. See, the Norse understood something we've forgotten. Marriage wasn't just about attraction or convenience. It was about finding someone smart enough to survive with you. The riddle contest wasn't hazing, it was screening, because when winter lasts 6 months, and raiders might attack any day, you need a partner who can think fast and solve problems. Intelligence was survival. These riddle contests died out centuries ago, replaced by modern courtship rituals that test, well, not much really. Dating apps. Small talk. Whether someone can afford dinner. The Norse way was brutal but honest. They wanted to know if this person could help them thrive, not just survive. Maybe they were onto something. In a world where partnerships still face real challenges, financial stress, career pressures, raising children, perhaps we should ask deeper questions before saying I do. Sometimes the old ways knew what really mattered. Trial marriages. Temporary sacred unions. Wales, 15th century. Picture this. You meet someone at Harvest Festival. You like them. They like you. But here's the thing. Marriage is forever. And forever is a really long time when you barely know each other. So the Welsh had this brilliant solution. Trial marriage. Hand fasting, they called it. Live together for exactly a year and a day. Share a bed. Share meals. Share everything. Then decide if you want to make it official. Sounds modern, right? It wasn't. This was serious business. The ceremony happened at crossroads or on hilltops. Sacred spaces where the old gods still whispered through the wind. The couple would clasp hands, speak their intentions to the gathered witnesses, and jump over a broomstick together. That's it. They were bound, but not forever. Just long enough to figure out if they could stand each other when the romance wore off. Because in medieval Wales, practical love mattered more than passionate declarations. You needed someone who wouldn't let you starve when the harvest failed. The year started sweet. Every couple thought they'd be different. They'd make it work. Love would conquer all. But then October came, and the first real test, food storage. She wanted to preserve more turnips. He thought they needed more grain. Small disagreement, right? Wrong. When you're facing a Welsh winter with limited supplies, every decision could mean survival or starvation, and suddenly you're screaming at each other over vegetables, while the neighbours listen through thin walls. This is when trial marriages got real. Winter in Wales was brutal. Dark by 4 in the afternoon, rain that soaked through everything, and you're stuck inside a one-room cottage with someone whose breathing suddenly annoys you. He chews too loud. She hums constantly. He never helps with mending. She burns the porridge every morning. These aren't character flaws in summer, when you can escape outside. In January, when you're trapped together for months, they become reasons to question everything. Many couples started planning their exit strategy by February. But then there were the couples who found something deeper during those hard months. Take Gwen and Rhys, documented in a church record from 1487. Their first winter nearly broke them. They fought about everything: money, chores, his drinking, her temper. But when Gwen got sick with fever, Rhys sat by her bed for 6 straight days, fed her broth, sang old songs, didn't sleep. That's when she knew. Not during the good times, during the worst time. When someone chooses to stay when they could easily walk away, spring brought different challenges. Planting season meant long days, back-breaking work, and constant decisions about the future. Do we plant more barley or oats? Where do we build the new fence? Whose family do we visit for Easter? These weren't just practical questions. They were tests of whether you could build a life together. Some couples discovered they wanted completely different futures. He dreamed of expanding the farm. She wanted to move closer to her mother. Compromise wasn't always possible. The hardest trial was pregnancy. It happened to about half the trial marriage couples. Suddenly the stakes changed completely. This wasn't just about two people anymore. Welsh law was clear: children from hand fasting were legitimate, but only if the parents made it official. If they separated, the child stayed with the mother, but without inheritance rights. So couples faced an impossible choice: stay together for the baby's sake, even if they were miserable, or separate and doom their child to poverty. The pressure was crushing. Some couples used pregnancy as an excuse to escape bad matches. Mary and Defid, she got pregnant in month 8 of their trial. Everyone expected them to marry officially. Instead, they separated. The community was scandalized. But here's what the gossips didn't know. Defid had been hitting her since month 3. The pregnancy gave her the perfect reason to leave without admitting the real truth. Her son grew up poor but safe. Sometimes trial marriages saved lives in ways nobody expected. As the year and a day approached, the real drama began. Families got involved. Neighbours picked sides. Money changed hands in bets about who would stay together. The pressure was incredible. Some couples who genuinely loved each other broke up just to spite interfering relatives. Others stayed together out of stubbornness, even though they'd been planning to leave for months. The community watched every interaction, looking for signs. Would they renew their vows or walk away forever? The tension was unbearable. The final ceremony was simple but powerful. The couple returned to the same crossroads where they'd first clasped hands. If they wanted to stay together, they'd speak their permanent vows and exchange rings. If not, they'd walk away in opposite directions, officially released from all obligations. About 60% chose to marry. The rest, they separated peacefully, often remaining friends. No shame, no scandal, just two people who tried and decided they weren't meant for forever. It was incredibly civilized. Trial marriage died out when the church gained more power in Wales. Bishops declared it sinful, improper, a mockery of holy matrimony. But for centuries it gave ordinary people something precious: choice. The freedom to discover if someone was your life partner before making an irreversible commitment. In a world where most marriages were arranged for political or economic reasons, the Welsh created space for love to grow naturally. And maybe, just maybe, they were onto something we've forgotten in our rush to forever. Brooches as tokens. The Scottish Highlands, 1745, where love wasn't just whispered, it was forged in silver and worn over the heart. See, when a Highland man wanted to claim a woman as his own, he didn't just offer pretty words. He commissioned a brooch. Not any brooch, one carved with symbols that told their whole story. The thistle for Scotland, hands clasped in eternal promise. Maybe her clan's emblem intertwined with his. These weren't just accessories, they were contracts. Binding promises hammered into metal that would outlast flesh. Moira MacLeod knew the weight of silver before she knew the weight of love. Her grandmother's brooch had been passed down for 5 generations, each woman adding her own story to the ancient metal. But when Hamish Fraser appeared at her clan's gathering, everything changed. He wasn't just another Highland warrior. He was the blacksmith's son who could shape metal like poetry. And when he looked at Moira, well, that's when she understood why women treasured these symbols so fiercely. Some promises needed more than words. The courtship dance began at harvest time. Hamish would arrive each morning with his father's tools, mending clan weapons, sharpening dirks. But his eyes always found Moira spinning wool by the cottage door. She'd catch him staring, and pretend not to notice the small silver pieces he was secretly crafting during breaks. Tiny leaves, delicate knotwork, the beginnings of something magnificent. In the Highlands, a man didn't court with flowers that wilted. He courted with metal that would endure Scottish winters and Scottish hearts. 3 months into their silent courtship, Hamish finally approached Moira's father, but he didn't ask for her hand. Not yet. Instead, he asked permission to craft her brooch. This was Highland tradition at its most sacred. The father's approval meant the young man could begin creating the symbol that would bind their families. Old MacLeod studied Hamish's calloused hands, the steadiness in his gaze, the respectful way he spoke of Moira. Then he nodded. The real courtship could begin. Metal and love, forged together in fire. Winter nights in the blacksmith's forge. Hamish worked by candlelight, shaping silver into something worthy of Moira's heart. Every curve had meaning. The intertwined thistles represented their clans joining. The Celtic knots symbolized love without end. At the centre, two hands clasped in eternal promise, just like the ancient Fede rings but uniquely Scottish. His father watched approvingly. "A brooch reveals a man's soul," the old smith said. "Make sure yours is worthy of the woman who'll wear it." Hamish's soul poured into every strike of the hammer. Spring arrived with the brooch's completion. Hamish had created something extraordinary, a silver masterpiece that caught Highland light like captured moonbeams. But presenting it required ceremony. On Beltane Eve, as clan fires burned across the hills, he approached Moira under the ancient oak where her grandmother once received her own love token. His hands trembled as he opened the leather pouch. The brooch gleamed against dark velvet, every detail perfect. "Moira MacLeod," he whispered, "will you accept my promise?" Her breath caught. This was the moment that would define everything. She lifted the brooch with reverent fingers, feeling its weight, not just silver, but destiny. In accepting this token, she wasn't just accepting his love, she was accepting his name, his clan, his future children. The brooch would be pinned over her heart, announcing to every Highland soul that she belonged to Hamish Fraser, that their love had been forged in fire and blessed by tradition. "Aye," she whispered, voice thick with emotion, "I'll wear your promise." He pinned it carefully to her tartan, sealing their fate with ancient ritual. The engagement period lasted one full season, as Highland custom demanded. During those months, Moira wore the brooch every day, and every Highland eye that saw it understood her status. She was claimed, protected, promised. Other young men stepped respectfully aside. Women smiled knowingly, remembering their own token ceremonies. The brooch became part of her identity, catching firelight during evening gatherings, gleaming during Sunday kirk services. It whispered the same message constantly. Hamish Fraser's heart beats here, bound in silver, promised in love, sealed in Highland tradition. Their wedding day dawned clear and bright, typical Scottish beauty after weeks of Highland rain. Moira wore her grandmother's dress, but Hamish's brooch remained pinned over her heart throughout the ceremony. The minister spoke of love and duty, but everyone's eyes kept drifting to that silver symbol. It had announced their intention, survived their courtship, and now would bless their marriage. As they exchanged vows, the brooch caught sunlight streaming through kirk windows. "A sign," the old women whispered. Even heaven approved of love, forged in Highland tradition. Years passed. Children came. The brooch remained constant, pinned daily to Moira's bodice, growing more precious with time. When their daughter Margaret turned 16, Moira carefully removed the ancient silver and placed it in her daughter's palm. "This carries our love," she explained, "but also your father's skill, your grandmother's blessings, and Highland tradition itself. Someday, when the right man offers you his heart forged in metal, you'll understand why we treasure these tokens. They're not just jewelry, they're promises that transcend time." Margaret's eyes shone with understanding. The Highland tradition of love brooches survived centuries, each token carrying forward ancient promises. Some were lost in clan battles, others passed through generations like Moira's, gathering stories and strength. But every brooch shared the same sacred purpose, proving that true love deserved symbols as enduring as Highland stone, as precious as Highland honour. In a world where words could be forgotten and flowers would fade, These silver promises remained constant. Metal and love, forged together in Highland fire, worn proudly over Highland hearts. Some traditions never die, they just wait for the right hearts to claim them. Kneeling knights, the grand gesture of love. Picture this, a fully armoured knight, dropping to one knee before his lady love, steel clanking against stone, everyone watching, his whole future hanging on her next words. This wasn't just romance, this was political theatre, social suicide if it went wrong. And here's the wild part, we're still doing this exact same gesture today. Every time someone gets down on one knee with a ring, they're reenacting a medieval power play that could make or break entire bloodlines. The knight's proposal was pure spectacle. Full plate armour polished to mirror shine, banners flying, sometimes hundreds of witnesses gathered in castle courtyards. The armour itself told a story, each dent from battles fought, each decoration earned through service. When he knelt, that metal didn't just clank, it sang his worthiness. The weight of it, 60 pounds of steel, made the gesture even more significant. You don't kneel in full armour unless you mean it. Every movement deliberate, ceremonial. The kneeling itself carried layers of meaning. Medieval audiences understood instantly. Knights knelt to their lords in feudal submission. They knelt before altars in sacred devotion. And now he's kneeling before her, placing her in the position of power. She becomes his lord, his sacred devotion, his everything. It's surrender disguised as courtship. The lady literally looks down at this warrior, who could kill a dozen men, and he's making himself completely vulnerable, asking permission, seeking consent. Revolutionary stuff for the 1200s. Her response carried enormous weight. If she extended her hand for him to kiss, acceptance. If she stepped back, rejection, and not just romantic rejection. Social humiliation, political consequences. Everyone would know by sunset. His reputation, his standing at court, his future marriage prospects, all decided in that moment. Some ladies kept nights waiting, milking the drama. Others had clearly planned their response. But that pause, that silence while she decided, it could last forever in his mind. Pure medieval anxiety. The church blessed this gesture as sacred theatre. Marriage was a sacrament, and the proposal itself carried religious weight. Some knights carried religious relics, blessed rings, or holy tokens during the proposal. Priests might witness the moment, lending divine authority to the proceedings. The lady often wore religious imagery, crosses, saint medallions, symbols of purity. When she accepted, it wasn't just personal consent, it was spiritual union beginning. God himself was supposedly watching. No pressure at all for these poor medieval romantics. The social pressure was crushing. Everyone knew when a proposal was coming. Court gossip travelled faster than royal messengers. The knight's friends, the lady's family, rival suitors, all watching for signs. Some proposals happened at tournaments, others at religious festivals. The timing had to be perfect. Too early after a military defeat. Awkward. During political upheaval. Terrible optics. The knight often spent weeks planning not just the words, but the setting, the witnesses, the symbolic elements. Medieval event planning at its most stressful. The actual words varied by region and century, but they carried legal weight. My lady, I offer my sword, my service, my devotion, and my name, sometimes in Latin for extra gravitas, often referencing God, honour, and protection. The lady's response was equally formal. I accept your service and offer my hand in return. These weren't casual conversations. They were verbal contracts witnessed by nobles who could testify in court later. Every word mattered. Scribes sometimes recorded particularly elegant proposals for posterity. The witnesses weren't just spectators. They were insurance policies. Medieval marriages faced constant challenges, accusations of coercion, questions about consent, inheritance disputes. Having noble witnesses who could swear they saw voluntary acceptance protected both parties legally. Some proposals were deliberately public to prevent later denials. Others were intimate but still required at least 2 witnesses. The most romantic gesture was also the most legally binding performance these medieval lovers would ever give, romance with paperwork included. Fast forward 800 years, we're still doing this. The modern proposal on one knee comes directly from this medieval tradition. The ring instead of a sword. The request for her hand instead of feudal submission. Even the surprise element. Medieval knights often surprised their ladies with public proposals at tournaments or festivals. We moved it to restaurants and beaches, but the fundamental performance remains identical. A public or semi-public demonstration of vulnerability, devotion, and the request for acceptance. But here's what's fascinating. The medieval version was often more practical than romantic. These knights weren't usually proposing to strangers they'd fallen for. Most proposals formalized arrangements already negotiated between families. The kneeling ceremony was political theatre to make arranged marriages feel romantic. The real courtship happened in stolen conversations, secret letters, and careful chaperoned meetings. The grand gesture was the finale, not the beginning. We flipped the script. Modern proposals start relationships. Medieval ones celebrated political deals. The legacy runs deeper than wedding proposals. Every time someone kneels in submission, seeks permission formally, or makes grand romantic gestures, they're channeling medieval chivalry. Knights kneeling before ladies created our template for romantic devotion. The idea that love should involve surrender, service, and placing your beloved on a pedestal. Whether that's healthy relationship dynamics is another question entirely. But 8 centuries later, we're still performing versions of this medieval script. Some traditions never die, they just trade armor for tuxedos. Unraveling the threads. Examining modern love. Here's something that'll mess with your head. We think modern dating is complicated. Try being a medieval woman who had to soak an apple in her armpit sweat and feed it to her crush. That was actual courtship, real documented history. Now we swipe right and call it progress. But here's the thing, when you strip away the smartphones and dating apps, when you look past the surface differences, modern love isn't that different from medieval romance. Same fears, same hopes, same desperate need to connect, just different rules. We've got dating apps. They had matchmakers. We scroll through hundreds of faces, judging compatibility in seconds. Medieval families spent months negotiating marriages, examining bloodlines, calculating dowries. Both systems reduce complex humans to data points. Age, wealth, appearance, social status. The algorithm hasn't changed much, just the technology. Medieval parents worried about their daughter marrying a wastrel who'd squander her inheritance. Modern parents worry about their daughter dating someone with bad credit who'll ruin her financial future. Different century, same conversation. Moving in together? Medieval couples had bundling. They'd share a bed, fully clothed, wooden board between them. Families sleeping nearby. It was a compatibility test. Can you spend intimate hours together without losing control? Modern couples move in together for the same reason, testing compatibility before commitment. We just call it different names. Trial run, seeing how it goes, taking the next step. The wooden board's gone, but the anxiety remains. Will this work? Are we ready? Can we make this last? Your wedding ring sits on your 4th finger because medieval people believed a vein ran directly from that finger to your heart. The vein of love, they called it. Total anatomical nonsense, but beautiful symbolism. Medieval rings showed clasped hands, the handshake that sealed marriage contracts. Our rings are plain bands, supposedly representing eternal circles with no beginning or end. Both traditions say the same thing. This matters. This is permanent. This connects us. The marketing might be different, but the message hasn't changed in 800 years. Engagement periods. We think 6 months to 2 years is normal planning time. Medieval couples had bans posted on church doors for 3 consecutive Sundays, giving everyone time to object. Way shorter timeline, but similar concept. Public announcement, waiting period, opportunity for problems to surface before it's too late. The difference? Medieval objections were serious. Already married to someone else, too closely related, vows to the church. Our objections are more like, he doesn't treat you right, or she's wrong for you. Lower stakes, same protective instinct. Parent involvement. Medieval marriages required family approval because they were business mergers disguised as love stories. Property, alliances, bloodlines. Parents negotiated everything. Modern parents still get involved, just more subtly. Worried questions about career prospects, family background, long-term compatibility. Same concerns wrapped in gentler language. Medieval fathers asked about land ownership and political connections. Modern fathers ask about 401k plans and career stability. The interrogation got more polite, but it never stopped, because parents still worry about their children choosing partners who'll make life harder instead of easier. Medieval families paid dowries, basically the bride's inheritance given at marriage instead of death. Cattle, land, household goods, sometimes enormous sums. Today, the bride's family still pays for most weddings. Average American wedding costs $30,000. We traded livestock for photographers, land for venues, but the financial burden stayed with the same family. Medieval widows were desirable matches because they inherited wealth and property. Modern divorcees are often financially independent, own homes, have established careers, different assets, same appeal. Financial stability never goes out of style. Medieval people married for survival. Alliances, property. Love was a lucky bonus. We marry for love and call practical considerations shallow or mercenary. But look at modern dating profiles. Income requirements, education levels, career ambitions. We're still screening for providers and partners who will improve our lives. We just pretend it's all about emotional connection. Medieval people were more honest about the transaction. Both systems want the same thing: security, compatibility, someone who makes life better. We're just less upfront about calculating the practical benefits while hunting for emotional ones. Medieval couples couldn't have sex on Sundays, holy days 40 days before Easter and Christmas. Church law, breaking these rules meant committing mortal sin. Modern couples navigate different restrictions. Her place or mine? When are the roommates gone? Are we exclusive? Ready for that step. Different rules, same negotiation. Medieval people had bundling boards and chaperones. We have the talk about being ready, taking it slow, making sure this means something. The wooden boards are gone, but we still create boundaries around intimacy, still deciding when physical closeness matches emotional readiness. Medieval lovers sent handwritten letters, sometimes taking weeks to reach their destination. Every word mattered because paper and ink cost money. Time and effort went into each message. We send dozens of texts daily, instant communication that cost nothing. But we're worse at saying what we mean. Medieval love letters were formal, poetic, carefully crafted. Our texts are fragments, quick responses, emoji interpretations. We have faster communication, but somehow worse connection. All this technology, and we're still struggling to say I love you, I miss you, I want to spend my life with you. So what's really changed? The rituals evolved, but the core human experience remains identical. Medieval couples worried about compatibility, family approval, financial security. They wanted passion, partnership, someone to face life with. Sound familiar? We dress it up differently now. Swipe instead of matchmakers. Cohabitation instead of bundling. Text messages instead of handwritten letters. But underneath all the modern complexity, we're still those medieval lovers, hoping someone will choose us, stay with us, build something lasting together. Love finds a way, regardless of the century, always has, always will, as the heart beats, our journey through love. Here we are, at the end of our winding path through history's most fascinating love stories. What a journey it's been. We've travelled from medieval apple armpit courtship to Renaissance poison rings, from bundling boards to secret royal marriages. Tonight, as we close this chapter together, let's take a moment to remember where we've been, the strange, the scandalous, the utterly bizarre customs that somehow led us to the way we love today. Think back to those medieval women soaking apples in their armpit sweat, believing this would win a man's heart. Sounds ridiculous now, right? But here's what gets me. They were trying to share something intimate, something uniquely theirs, that impulse, that desire to give a piece of yourself to someone you care about. That hasn't changed at all. We still do it. We just use perfume instead of, well, armpit apples. The method evolved. The heart behind it stayed exactly the same. Remember those knights wearing their ladies' handkerchiefs into battle? Think about that for a second. A grown warrior risking his life, carrying a piece of fabric because it smelled like someone he loved. We laugh at the drama of it all, but isn't that beautiful? In a world of arranged marriages and political alliances, here was this one small rebellion, this quiet way of saying, my heart belongs to someone, even when society said it shouldn't matter. The bundling boards still make me smile. Imagine explaining that to someone today. Well, we put this wooden plank between us and spent the night talking, but those couples were onto something we've forgotten. They had to fall in love with minds first, bodies second. In our swipe right world, maybe we could learn from those long winter nights where all you had was conversation, where getting to know someone actually meant getting to know someone. Every tradition we've explored, every bizarre ritual, every scandalous affair, they all left fingerprints on how we love today. Your engagement ring, medieval fede rings with clasped hands, white wedding dress, Queen Victoria's bold choice, getting down on one knee, a knight's pledge to his lady, honeymoons, medieval mead drinking for fertility. We're not creating new traditions. We're just updating the ancient ones. The same human hearts beating the same rhythms across centuries. What strikes me most is how these customs shaped entire civilizations. Not through grand battles or political treaties, but through quiet moments. A secret marriage here, a forbidden love there. Catherine of Valois, following her heart, gave us the Tudor dynasty. One widow's choice to love a Welsh squire changed English history forever. Love didn't just conquer hearts, it rewrote the rules of who got to sit on thrones. Pretty powerful stuff for something we call just feelings. The church tried to control love with calendars and contracts. Nobility tried to cage it with arranged marriages and political alliances. But love kept finding ways around every barrier they built. Secret ceremonies at midnight, messages hidden in poetry, rings passed between trembling fingers. Every generation thought they were the first to rebel against their parents' expectations. Turns out, rebellion in the name of love is humanity's oldest tradition. Here's something that surprised me while researching all this. Widows had more freedom to choose love than anyone else. They'd paid their dues to family expectations, survived their arranged marriages, and suddenly they could pick their own partners. Some of history's greatest love stories happened the second time around, when people finally got to choose with their hearts instead of their parents' bank accounts. Maybe wisdom does come with age. The phrase wearing your heart on your sleeve, it's not just an expression. Medieval knights literally did it, tied tokens from their beloved to their armour, right there for everyone to see. In a world where admitting feelings could be dangerous, they found ways to declare love anyway. They risked mockery, political consequences, even death, just to say this person matters to me. That kind of courage. We could use more of it today. As you drift off tonight, remember this. Every couple who ever held hands in secret, who ever exchanged rings by candlelight, Whoever chose love over convenience, they were your ancestors, not necessarily by blood, but by heart. They fought for the right to love freely, so that someday, centuries later, you could text someone goodnight and mean it. Their rebellions became your freedoms. Their scandals became your normal. The heart beats the same rhythm now as it did 1,000 years ago. Love still makes us do ridiculous things. We still give tokens of affection, still make promises we hope to keep, still believe that maybe, just maybe, this time will be different. Those medieval lovers would recognize us completely. They'd smile at our methods, but nod at our hopes. Sweet dreams, and may your own heart's journey be filled with wonder.